The night my father-in-law told me to leave his house, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "You failed our family," Robert Hale said calmly, standing at the head of the dining table like a judge delivering a verdict. "Pack your things. Take the girl. Be gone by morning." I was still in my police uniform. My badge was clipped to my belt, my service weapon locked in its case by the door. My daughter, Emily Hale, 6 years old, sat frozen beside me, her small fingers gripping the edge of the chair as if it were the only solid thing left in the room. No one spoke for her. Not my husband. Not my mother-in-law. Not the people I had lived under the same roof with for 8 years. If you've ever watched a woman be erased in real time by the people she trusted most, take a second to like, comment, and subscribe. Because what happened next didn't look like revenge at first. It looked like survival. My name is Rachel Hale. I was 31 years old, a patrol officer with the Riverside Police Department in California, sworn in for 9 years, decorated twice for restraint under pressure. I had faced armed suspects, domestic violence calls, fatal accidents on the freeway. Nothing prepared me for being sentenced at a family dinner. It started, as these things often do, with something small, a comment. My mother-in-law, Margaret Hale, liked to make them quietly, always when my husband wasn't listening, always with a smile. "You're a good mother," she'd say, adjusting Emily's dress. "It's just such a shame you couldn't give us a boy." At first, I ignored it. I told myself she was old-fashioned, that she didn't mean harm, that Daniel Hale, my husband, would shut it down if it mattered. He never did. Daniel was a civil engineer. On paper, respectable. In reality, absent. He worked long hours, came home late, and let his parents run our household because it was easier than pushing back. We lived in their house. That detail mattered. When I married Daniel at 23, fresh out of the academy, his parents insisted it was practical. Their house was big, their neighborhood safe, their rules unspoken but absolute. I told myself it was temporary. Years passed. Emily was born after 2 miscarriages. I nearly died from complications during labor. I returned to work after 12 weeks, bleeding still not fully resolved, because we needed my income. I worked nights, weekends, holidays. I was the one who paid for Emily's school supplies, her health insurance, her extracurriculars. But inside that house, I was still treated like a guest who overstayed. Margaret decided what Emily wore, what she ate, when she slept. Robert controlled the finances, despite my paycheck covering half the mortgage. Daniel let them. And always, hovering over everything, was the unspoken disappointment. No son. The night everything collapsed was supposed to be a celebration. Robert had invited extended family for his 65th birthday. A long table, too many plates, too much wine. Emily had drawn him a card in crayon, carefully writing "Grandpa" at the top. He barely glanced at it. Halfway through dinner, after the cake was cut, Robert cleared his throat. "I've been thinking about legacy," he said, eyes sliding toward Daniel. "About what we leave behind." Margaret nodded, already knowing where this was going. "A family name needs sons," Robert continued. "Strong sons." The room went quiet. Daniel stared at his plate. I felt Emily shift beside me. "We gave Rachel time," Margaret said gently. "We were patient." That word again. Patient. As if my body were a project that failed quality control. Robert turned to me. "You're a police officer," he said. "You understand responsibility. You understand failure." I met his gaze. Years of training kept my face neutral. "You had one job," he continued, "and you didn't deliver." That was when he said it. "Pack your things." Daniel finally looked up. "Dad," he started. Robert raised a hand. "This house belongs to us," he said. "The family business belongs to us. And the future belongs to those who carry the name properly." Margaret stood and placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "You can stay," she said to him. "You're our son." Then she looked at me. "But she and the girl go." Emily's breath hitched. I stood slowly. "You're throwing your granddaughter out," I said evenly. Robert didn't flinch. "She's not a Hale in the way that matters," he replied. Daniel said nothing. That was the moment I understood. This wasn't just cruelty. This was a calculation. They believed I was powerless. A cop without a house. A mother without a son. a woman without a voice in their world. They were wrong. I packed that night. Not in anger, not in tears. I packed with precision. I took Emily's documents, birth certificate, medical records, school paperwork. I photographed financial statements Robert thought I'd never notice. I copied texts, voicemails, bank transfers tied to the so-called family business Daniel never actually owned. At 4:17 a.m., I buckled Emily into my car. She looked at the house one last time. "Mom," she whispered, "did I do something wrong?" I started the engine. "No," I said. "They did." As I drove toward an unknown future, one thought settled in my chest, cold and steady. They thought kicking me out ended the story. They had no idea it had just started. I filed for custody at 8:43 a.m. the next morning. Not because I was emotional, because timing matters. The clerk at the Riverside County Superior Court looked at my uniform, then at Emily's small hand wrapped around my sleeve. She softened without saying a word and slid the paperwork across the counter. Sole physical custody, emergency order, temporary restraining order for removal from the marital home. I filled every line carefully. Addresses, dates, names. Daniel Hale, respondent. Robert Hale, interfering party. Margaret Hale, interfering party. Words matter, especially when they are sworn. By noon, my phone started buzzing. Daniel called first. "I didn't know he'd say that," he said, voice thin, almost rehearsed. "You know how my dad gets." "I know how you get," I replied. You stayed seated. There was silence. "Come back," he said finally. "We'll talk to them. You can apologize." "For what?" I asked. "For embarrassing them," he said, without irony. I ended the call. Emily and I moved into a short-term rental near Magnolia Avenue, a place I could afford month to month. 2 rooms, thin walls, a window that rattled when trucks passed. Emily took the smaller room without complaint. That night, as I tucked her in, she asked a question children ask when adults fail them. "Are we poor now?" "No," I said. "We're free." She didn't fully understand. That was okay. She didn't need to yet. The next morning, Daniel's lawyer filed a response. Not for reconciliation, for custody. They asked for primary custody based on stability, claiming I had volatile hours and dangerous work. They listed the Hale family home as the child's primary residence. They cited Emily's proximity to her grandparents as a benefit. They left out the eviction. They left out the words that mattered. My supervisor, Lieutenant Carla Moreno, called me into her office after roll call. She was a 20-year veteran, sharp-eyed, unflappable. "I heard," she said, closing the door. I nodded. "You need time?" she asked. "I need a schedule adjustment," I said. "Temporary." She studied me. "You're not asking for favors," she said. "You're asking for logistics." "Yes, ma'am." She nodded once. Approved. That mattered more than she knew. The first hearing was set for 10 days later. 10 days is a long time when someone is trying to rewrite your life. Margaret showed up at Emily's school on day 3. The office called me while I was finishing a report. "There's a woman here claiming to be the child's grandmother," the secretary said. "She wants to take her to lunch." I drove there lights off, but fast. Margaret stood in the office, pearls on, posture perfect. She smiled when she saw me, like we were sharing a private joke. "I just wanted to see my granddaughter," she said sweetly. "You've always been so emotional." The principal, Dr. Henry Walsh, looked between us. "She doesn't leave with you," I said evenly. "And if you come back without my written consent, I'll file for harassment." Margaret's smile slipped for half a second. "You're making this ugly," she said quietly. "You made it illegal," I replied. She left without another word. That afternoon, I pulled the credit report Daniel never thought I'd request. It was worse than I expected. The so-called family business, Hale Structural Solutions, had loans secured against the house. Lines of credit Daniel co-signed without telling me. Missed payments, deferred interest, cash flow issues masked by Robert's reputation in town. There was more. A Shell LLC registered 2 years ago under Margaret's maiden name. Transfers routed through it. Payments labeled as consulting fees. Consulting for what? That question kept me awake. I called Marissa Chen, a forensic accountant I'd worked with on a fraud case years earlier. "I need a look," I said. Off the record. She didn't ask why. By the end of the week, Daniel escalated. He showed up at my rental unannounced, pounding on the door like ownership was something you could reclaim by volume. "Open the door," he said. "You're kidnapping my daughter." I opened it. I didn't step aside. "She's inside," I said, "and you're trespassing." He lowered his voice. "My parents are furious," he said. "They're saying things." "They always are," I replied. "You don't understand," he insisted. "They can destroy you." I almost laughed. "They already tried," I said. He leaned in. "You think your badge protects you?" he asked. "My father has friends." That was the threat. Subtle. Cowardly. Recorded. Because I'd turned my phone on the moment he raised his voice. "Leave," I said. "Now." He did. The hearing came faster than expected. Judge Elena Ruiz listened without interruption. She read the filings. She looked at Daniel when he spoke. She looked at me when I did. "You evicted the mother of your child?" she asked Robert, who had inserted himself as a concerned party. "It's our home," Robert said. "We have standards." Judge Ruiz's eyes hardened. "This court has standards too," she said. She granted temporary sole physical custody to me. Supervised visitation for Daniel. No contact order for the grandparents, pending investigation. The word investigation hung in the air. Outside the courtroom, Margaret stared at me like I'd committed an unforgivable sin. "This isn't over," she said. "No," I agreed. "It isn't." That night, Marissa called. "I found something," she said. Actually, several things. I sat at the small kitchen table, Emily asleep in the next room. "Tell me," I said. "Hale Structural Solutions is bleeding," Marissa said. "And someone's been siphoning money. Not Daniel." "Who?" I asked. There was a pause. "Your father-in-law," she said. "And he's been using Daniel as cover." I closed my eyes. That explained everything. The control, the pressure, the obsession with legacy. A son who wouldn't question him. A daughter-in-law who knew the law. I understood then why they'd moved so fast to erase me. They weren't just cruel. They were afraid. I didn't go to internal affairs. Not yet. That choice wasn't hesitation. It was discipline. As a police officer, I knew the difference between suspicion and proof. As a woman who had just been thrown out of her own marriage, I knew the danger of moving too fast. So I waited. I did my job. I took my calls. I walked into strangers' houses at 3 a.m. and calmed situations other people had already lost control of. I came home, cooked dinner for Emily, helped with homework, read her a chapter of the same book every night so she wouldn't feel how much had changed. And in the quiet hours, I built a case. Marissa Chen sent me spreadsheets first. Clean, organized, emotionless. She flagged patterns that only someone trained to look for absence would notice. Money moving in loops. Payments that never landed where they were supposed to. Vendors that existed on paper and nowhere else. "Robert Hale isn't skimming," she told me during our second call. "He's funneling." "Where?" I asked. That's what he didn't expect anyone to ask. She sent another file. An LLC registered in Nevada under a trustee service. 2 shell companies beneath it. One tied directly to a private storage facility in San Bernardino County. Storage meant documents, hardware, backup drives. It also meant urgency. I requested a day off under personal leave and drove past the Hale house for the first time since we'd been expelled. The lights were on. Margaret's car in the driveway. Daniel's truck parked crooked, like he hadn't bothered to straighten it. I didn't stop. I wasn't there to confront them. I was there to observe. Later that evening, Daniel called again. He sounded different this time. Quieter. Less certain. "My dad wants to talk," he said. "No," I replied. "He says, this has gone too far," Daniel insisted, "that lawyers don't need to be involved." "That's funny," I said. "He involved them first." "He's willing to let you come back," Daniel said. "With conditions." I closed my eyes. "What conditions?" I asked. "You step down from patrol," he said. "Transfer to admin. And we raise Emily properly." "Define properly," I said. There was a pause. "Traditional," he said. That word again. I ended the call without another word. The next morning, Emily didn't want to go to school. Not because she was sick. Because a boy in her class told her she was going to live with her grandparents now. "They said kids hear things," she said quietly. "That adults talk." That was when I understood something else. This wasn't contained. They were already shaping a narrative. I met with attorney Sofia Alvarez, a family law specialist recommended by Judge Ruiz herself. Her office was small, efficient, No inspirational quotes on the wall. "They're trying to exhaust you," Sophia said after reviewing the filings. "Financially, emotionally, strategically." "They're underestimating me," I replied. Sophia smiled faintly. "Most people do," she said, "until it's too late." She advised me to document everything. The school incident, Daniel's calls, Margaret's attempt to remove Emily. She also suggested something unexpected. "File a motion for discovery," she said. "Force them to open their books." "That'll make them panic," I said. "Yes," she replied. "That's the point." We filed that afternoon. By nightfall, Robert Hale had called my captain. Captain James Whitaker asked me into his office the next morning. "Sit," he said. I did. "Your father-in-law has concerns," he said carefully, "about retaliation, abuse of authority." I didn't react. "I expected this," I said. Whitaker studied me. "You're clean," he said. "Your record's solid. But you're close to something. I can feel it." "I'm close to the truth," I said. "And I won't touch it in uniform." That mattered. Whitaker nodded. "Good," he said. "Because if you're right, this gets big." That afternoon, Marissa called again. "They moved," she said. "Robert's transferring assets." "When?" I asked. "This morning," she replied, "after the discovery filing." I drove to the storage facility that night, not as a cop, as a woman who knew where secrets hid. The unit number Marissa flagged was rented under a trust, paid in cash. No cameras inside, but plenty in the corridor. I didn't break in. I didn't have to. I waited. At 9:17 p.m., Robert Hale arrived. He wasn't alone. Daniel was with him. They unlocked the unit together. That was the betrayal. Not the eviction, not the silence at dinner. This, my husband helping his father hide evidence. I took photos, timestamps, license plates, their faces lit by fluorescent light as they carried boxes labeled only with dates. When they left, I followed at a distance. They drove straight to the Hale house. I sat in my car long after they went inside, my hands steady on the wheel. I wasn't angry. I was focused. The next day, Sophia filed an emergency motion. Attached exhibits included financial anomalies, harassment records, and photographic evidence of potential concealment of assets. Judge Ruiz scheduled an expedited hearing, and for the first time, Daniel texted something that wasn't defensive. "I didn't know it was this bad," he wrote. I stared at the message. He'd known. He just hadn't cared until it threatened him. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the photos to Marissa and asked one question. "What crime does this look like?" Her answer came fast. "Multiple," she wrote. "And not the kind you walk away from." I did not serve the warrant. That detail matters. At 6:12 a.m., while Emily was still asleep with one arm wrapped around her stuffed rabbit, my phone vibrated on the nightstand. It was Sophia Alvarez. "Judge Ruiz signed it," she said. "Search and seizure, financial records, digital storage, the unit in San Bernardino County, and the Hale residence." I sat up slowly. "And?" I asked. "And because of your position," she continued, "you are nowhere near this operation. You do not observe, you do not advise, you do not exist." "Understood," I said. She paused. "They didn't expect this to move so fast," she added. "Robert especially." I believed that. People like Robert Hale thrived on the assumption that time bent in their favor, that influence bought delay, that women waited, that daughters-in-law endured. At 7:03 a.m., I dropped Emily off at school. She hugged me harder than usual. "Are we in trouble?" she asked quietly. "No," I said. "We're being honest." She nodded, like that made sense. By 9:20 a.m., 2 unmarked vehicles from the Riverside County Financial Crimes Task Force pulled up to the Hale house. I didn't watch in person. I watched later. Body cam footage doesn't lie, but it doesn't editorialize either. It simply records who people become when control is removed. Robert answered the door in a robe, irritation already loaded in his posture. "What is this?" he demanded. The lead investigator, Detective Aaron Blake, spoke calmly. "Search warrant," he said. "Step aside." Margaret appeared behind Robert, clutching her cardigan tight, like it could hold her dignity together. "This is outrageous," she said. "We know people." Detective Blake didn't respond. Inside, the house transformed. Drawers opened, files cataloged, laptops bagged. A locked cabinet in Robert's study forced open. And then, They found the ledger. Not digital. Handwritten. Old school enough to feel untouchable. It wasn't. When Daniel walked in halfway through, still wearing his work boots, the room shifted. "What's going on?" he asked, eyes darting. Robert didn't answer. Margaret stared straight ahead. Daniel saw the boxes being labeled, the drives, the envelopes. And for the first time, his voice cracked. "Dad?" he said. Robert finally turned to him. "Go upstairs," he snapped. Daniel didn't move. Detective Blake looked at him. "Sir," he said, "do you live here?" "Yes," Daniel replied automatically. "Then you may want to speak to an attorney," Blake said. Right now. That was the moment Daniel understood. Not that his father had broken the law, but that he might pay for it. By noon, the story had moved. Not headlines. Not yet, but whispers. Hale Structural Solutions canceled a meeting with a municipal client. A supplier froze shipments pending clarification. The bank called in a loan review. By evening, Daniel called me. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He sounded small. "They took everything," he said. "Computers, papers, Dad's accounts." "I know," I said. "Did you do this?" he asked. I considered lying. I didn't. "I told the truth," I said. "The law did the rest." There was a long silence. "You could have warned me," he said. "I did," I replied. "For years." He exhaled sharply. "My parents are blaming you," he said. "I expected that," I said. "They say you planned this," he continued. "That you waited." "I did wait," I said. "For you to choose differently." He didn't respond. The emergency hearing was scheduled for Friday. This time, the courtroom was full. Not spectators. Professionals. Accountants. Attorneys. 2 representatives from the district attorney's office seated quietly in the back. Judge Elena Ruiz reviewed the findings without drama. "Based on the evidence presented," she said, "this court finds sufficient cause to expand the investigation into potential financial fraud, tax evasion, and concealment of assets." Margaret gasped. Robert clenched his jaw. Daniel stared at the floor. Judge Ruiz turned to Daniel. "Mr. Hale," she said, "your cooperation will be noted." His attorney leaned in, whispering urgently. Judge Ruiz then looked at me. "Ms. Hale," she said, "your request for sole legal and physical custody remains under consideration. Based on recent events, supervised visitation will continue." I nodded. Robert stood abruptly. "This is a setup," he said. "She's using her badge." Judge Ruiz's voice cut through the room. "She is not," she said. "And if you interrupt again, you will be removed." That silence was absolute. Outside the courtroom, reporters waited, not for me. For Robert. For Daniel. Margaret clutched her purse like it was the last thing she controlled. As they passed me, she hissed under her breath, "You destroyed us." I met her eyes. "No," I said quietly. "I stopped protecting you." That night, I sat on the floor of our rental with Emily, assembling a secondhand bookshelf I'd bought online. She handed me screws, like it was a game. "Is Grandpa mad?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Did we do something bad?" she asked. "No," I repeated. "We did something right." She thought about that, then smiled. The next morning, Sophia called. "They want to talk," she said. "Who?" I asked. "Daniel," she replied. "Alone." I looked at the wall clock. Time mattered. "Tell him," I said. "He had his chance to choose family." She paused. "And now?" she asked. I tightened the last screw and set the shelf upright. "Now," I said, "he chooses consequences." Daniel asked to meet me in a public place. That alone told me how far things had shifted. We met at a cafe near the courthouse, the kind with too much glass and nowhere to hide. He was already there when I arrived, hands wrapped around a coffee he hadn't touched. He stood when he saw me, hesitated, sat back down. "I didn't know how bad it was," he said, before I even ordered. I took the chair across from him. "You knew enough," I replied. He flinched. That reaction was new. For years, Daniel had been insulated by other people's certainty, his father's authority, his mother's approval. He had never had to sit inside the consequences. Now he was. "They're talking about charges," he said quietly. "Real ones." "Yes," I said. He rubbed his face with both hands. "My dad says this is temporary," he continued, "that lawyers fix these things." "That's not what your lawyer told you," I said. He looked up sharply. "You spoke to my lawyer?" "No," I said. "I read patterns." That was when his voice cracked. "He used me," Daniel said. My dad. He put things in my name, told me it was normal, that it was how business worked. And you believed him, I said. I trusted him, Daniel replied. I held his gaze. And you didn't trust me, I said. That truth settled between us, heavy and unavoidable. He leaned forward. I'll testify, he said. Against him. Against my mom if I have to. I didn't answer right away. I'll give them everything, he insisted. Emails, access, whatever they want. Why? I asked. He swallowed. Because I don't want Emily growing up thinking this is normal, he said. That was the first time he'd said her name without qualifying it, without framing her as a problem to be solved. It didn't move me the way he hoped. You're doing this because you're scared, I said calmly, not because you understand. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. I need you, he said finally. There it was, the reflex. The expectation that I would step in, translate chaos into order, absorb damage so he wouldn't have to. I stood. No, I said. You need a lawyer. And a mirror. He stared up at me. I'll lose everything, he said. I nodded. You already did, I replied. Outside, the wind cut through my jacket. I welcomed it. 2 hours later, Sophia called. He came in, she said. He's cooperating. Good, I replied. There's more, she added. He signed a declaration. I stopped walking. What kind of declaration? I asked. He admitted, she said carefully, that the eviction wasn't spontaneous. I closed my eyes. Go on, I said. He said his parents planned it, Sophia continued. They believed forcing you out would pressure you into backing off financially and professionally. And Daniel? I asked. He agreed to it, she said. He thought it would scare you. The words didn't hurt the way they would have weeks ago, they clarified. That night, I sat at the kitchen table after Emily went to bed and reread years of messages I'd saved without knowing why. Short dismissals, half answers, moments I'd minimized because acknowledging them would have meant acting sooner. I saw the pattern clearly now. Daniel hadn't been cruel. He'd been convenient. The next court date arrived with no drama. Judge Ruiz reviewed Daniel's declaration. She didn't react visibly. She didn't need to. This court finds a coordinated effort to interfere with custody and housing, she said. That finding will be reflected accordingly. Robert wasn't present. His attorney cited medical reasons. Margaret was there. She didn't look at me once. Judge Ruiz addressed me directly. Ms. Hale, she said, based on new evidence, the court grants you sole legal and physical custody of Emily Hale. The words landed cleanly. Supervised visitation for Daniel remained. The grandparents' no-contact order was extended. Margaret's hand trembled on her purse. Outside the courtroom, Daniel tried to speak to me. I'm doing the right thing now, he said. You're doing the necessary thing, I replied. Those aren't the same. He nodded, like he finally understood. That evening, Emily and I ate takeout on the floor. She told me about school, about a spelling test, about how her teacher said she was brave. I didn't tell her anything, Emily added quickly. I just listened. I smiled. That was new, too. Later that night, an unfamiliar number called. I answered. This is Detective Aaron Blake, the voice said. We need to talk. About? I asked. Your father-in-law, he replied. And something we found. The way he said it told me this wasn't just about money anymore. What did you find? I asked. A second set of books, he said. And a name that doesn't belong there. I sat up. Whose name? I asked. There was a pause. Yours, he said. My chest went still. That's impossible, I replied. Not if someone wanted to frame you, he said. The pieces snapped into place. The eviction, the urgency, the attempt to isolate me. They hadn't just wanted me gone. They had wanted me discredited. Detective, I said evenly. When can we meet? Tomorrow morning, he replied. Bring your attorney. I hung up and stared at the dark window. They thought pushing me out was the end. They thought fear would make me careless. Instead, they'd made a mistake that only someone who truly underestimated me would make. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was afraid, but because I was recalibrating. At 5:10 a.m., I sat at the small kitchen table with my laptop open, coffee untouched, and reread the same sentence from Detective Aaron Blake's message summary Sophia had forwarded. A second set of books. Your name appears as an approving officer. It wasn't just a threat to my custody case. It was a threat to my badge. And whoever planted it knew exactly how serious that was. At 7:45 a.m., Sophia Alvarez met me outside the Financial Crimes Office in Riverside. She wore a charcoal suit, hair pulled back tight, eyes already sharp with focus. "They didn't just fake documents," she said as we walked. "They tried to construct a narrative." "A bad one," I replied. "Yes," she said, "but close enough to hurt you if we don't dismantle it properly." Detective Blake greeted us in a small conference room. He didn't waste time. "We found 2 ledgers," he said, sliding copies across the table. "One aligns with reported income. The other shows off-book transfers routed through shell accounts." He tapped one page. "This signature appears on 3 approvals," he continued, "digitally inserted, dated on days you were on duty." Sophia glanced at me. "Rachel doesn't authorize transfers," she said calmly. "She's a patrol officer. She doesn't have that authority." Blake nodded. "We know," he said, "but someone wanted it to look like she did." He pulled up a screen. "These approvals are backdated to create overlap with your shifts," he said. "Whoever did this assumed no one would cross-check your duty logs." I leaned forward. "But you did," I said. "Yes," Blake replied. "Your GPS logs place you on active calls during each timestamp. One was a domestic violence response logged at 11:42 p.m. Another was a traffic collision on the I-215. Sophia exhaled slowly. "They tried to make you the fall person," she said. "They tried," Blake agreed. "And they rushed it." That detail mattered. People who rush make mistakes. "Who benefits?" Sophia asked. Blake didn't hesitate. "Robert Hale," he said. "If we believed Rachel was complicit, it would taint the investigation and delay everything." "And Daniel?" I asked. Blake's expression tightened. "He knew something," he said, "but not all of it." I nodded. That tracked. Daniel had always known enough to comply, never enough to confront. Blake leaned back. "We're expanding the investigation," he said. "This now includes attempted obstruction and falsification intended to implicate a law enforcement officer." Sophia's voice was even. "That's a felony," she said. "Yes," Blake replied. "Multiple." As we stood to leave, he added something quietly. "Rachel," he said, "you did the right thing by staying out of this officially." "I know," I said. Outside, Sophia stopped walking. "They were willing to burn you," she said. "Yes," I replied, "which means they're desperate." She nodded. "That changes the leverage," she said. By noon, I'd notified Internal Affairs myself. Not because I was required to yet, because transparency is protection. Captain James Whitaker listened without interrupting as I laid out the facts. He reviewed Blake's preliminary report. He checked my logs. Then he looked at me. "You're cleared," he said, "and I want that on record." "Thank you," I said. "But," he continued, "this is going to get uncomfortable." "I'm familiar with uncomfortable," I replied. That afternoon, Daniel called again. He didn't ask to meet. He didn't apologize. He sounded frightened. "They're saying your name came up," he said, "in the business records." "Yes," I said. "I didn't do that," he said quickly. "I swear." "I know," I replied. "That's not the point." "What do you mean?" he asked. "I mean, you didn't stop it," I said. "And now it's out of your hands." He went quiet. "My mom is blaming you," he said. "That's consistent," I replied. "She says you're trying to destroy us," he continued. I closed my eyes. "You destroyed yourselves," I said. "I just stopped absorbing it." That night, Margaret crossed a line she couldn't uncross. She sent a message to Emily's teacher, not asking about homework, asking questions about custody, about my work schedule, about whether Emily ever seemed frightened. The teacher forwarded it to me immediately. Her note was brief. "I'm uncomfortable with this. Please advise." I didn't hesitate. Sophia filed a motion within the hour. Harassment, interference, violation of court orders. Judge Ruiz scheduled an emergency hearing for the next morning. Margaret arrived wearing black, as if mourning something. Robert did not attend. Judge Ruiz reviewed the message transcript in silence. "Mrs. Hale," she said finally, "you are ordered to cease all contact with the child's school and community." Margaret tried to speak. Judge Ruiz raised a hand. "If you violate this order again," she said, "you will be held in contempt." Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. Outside the courtroom, Daniel caught up to me. "They're going to arrest him," he said, referring to his father. "Yes," I replied. "And if he goes down," Daniel continued, "he's going to take everyone with him." I looked at him carefully. "Are you asking me for help?" I asked. He hesitated. "I don't know what I'm asking," he admitted. "That's honest," I said. "It's also too late." He nodded. "I never thought you'd go this far," he said. I met his eyes. "I never thought you'd let them," I replied. That evening, Detective Blake called. We're executing the next warrant tomorrow, he said. Financial institutions, email servers. And? I asked. And we found correspondence, he added. From Margaret. My chest tightened. What kind? I asked. Emails, he said, discussing contingency plans, including one line that stood out. He paused. She wrote, "If Rachel doesn't fold, we make her dirty." I let the words settle. They hadn't just underestimated me. They had miscalculated me entirely. I wasn't fighting to win. I was fighting to be accurate. And accuracy, once documented, is unforgiving. The arrest happened on a Thursday, not at dawn, not with sirens, not in front of cameras. Robert Hale was taken into custody at 2:26 p.m. in the parking lot of a private bank branch in Redlands, still wearing his tailored blazer, still believing he could talk his way out of anything. He didn't see it coming. That detail mattered too. Detective Aaron Blake called me afterward, his voice steady. He didn't resist, he said. He looked confused. People like him usually are, I replied. The charges were precise. Financial fraud, tax evasion, obstruction of justice, attempted falsification of records implicating a law enforcement officer. The last one carried weight. By evening, the story had moved beyond whispers. Not headlines yet, but it was circulating where it hurt most, among lenders, contractors, board members. The people who had once nodded when Robert spoke now stopped answering his calls. Daniel found out from a coworker. He called me from his truck, engine still running. "They took my dad," he said, in public. "Yes," I said. "They're saying he tried to frame you," he added. "Yes," I repeated. There was a long silence. "I didn't know," he said finally. "You knew enough," I replied. "I didn't think he'd go that far," Daniel said. "That's because you never imagined a world where he lost," I said. He exhaled, shaky. "My mom is losing it," he said. "She keeps saying this is your fault." I closed my eyes. "Margaret is responsible for Margaret," I said. "So are you." That night, Margaret Hale broke. She didn't call me. She went to the police station. Not to confess, to accuse. She told the desk sergeant that I had manipulated evidence, that I had coerced witnesses, that I had abused my position to destroy her family. The report was logged and forwarded. Captain James Whitaker called me into his office the next morning. She came in hysterical, he said. But her story didn't line up. "I expected this," I said. "She wants you suspended," he continued. "And?" I asked. He slid a folder across the desk. "Internal Affairs reviewed everything," he said. "Your transparency protected you. Her complaint doesn't survive first contact with facts." I didn't touch the folder. "Thank you," I said. Whitaker leaned back. "This is personal," he said. "But you've kept it professional. That matters." "Yes, sir," I replied. That afternoon, Judge Elena Ruiz convened another hearing. Margaret sat alone at the defense table, her posture rigid, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Daniel sat behind her, eyes hollow. Robert's seat was empty. The prosecution presented the emails. The line Margaret had written was read aloud in open court. "If Rachel doesn't fold, we make her dirty." Margaret flinched. The courtroom didn't react loudly. It didn't need to. Judge Ruiz looked at Margaret for a long moment. "This court finds a pattern of harassment, manipulation, and attempted interference," she said. "Effective immediately, the no-contact order is permanent." Margaret's breath caught. "And," Judge Ruiz continued, "given recent developments, this court issues a protective order in favor of Rachel Hale and her child." She turned to me. "Miss Hale," she said, "you have done nothing wrong." I nodded once. Outside the courtroom, Daniel stopped me. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he said. "That's the problem," I replied. "You never meant for anything. You just let it." He swallowed. "My parents are finished," he said. "Yes," I said. "But that doesn't make us anything again." He nodded slowly, like he was finally learning how consequences worked. 2 days later, Daniel signed the divorce papers. No contest, no conditions, no appeals. He didn't fight custody. He didn't fight support. He didn't fight because there was nothing left to fight with. Margaret didn't attend. Robert couldn't. The house the Hales had thrown me out of went into foreclosure within 6 months. The family business dissolved quietly. Not dramatically. Not violently. Just gone. Emily adjusted faster than I expected. Children notice stability more than status. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, she looked up at me. "Mom," she said, "are we safe now?" I wrapped an arm around her. "Yes," I said. "We are." She smiled and leaned into me. That was when I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to consider before. I wasn't angry anymore. The anger had done its job. It had carried me through clarity. Now, it was gone. The promotion came without ceremony. No announcement, no plaque, no handshake in front of the department. Captain James Whitaker called me into his office at the end of a late shift. The building already quiet. The kind of quiet that makes conversations feel heavier than they are. "Sit," he said. I did. "We're restructuring the Domestic Violence and Family Crimes Unit," he said, sliding a thin folder across the desk. "Effective next month, you'll be transferring in as a lead investigator." I looked at the folder, but didn't open it. "I didn't apply," I said. "I know," Whitaker replied. "That's why you're getting it." He leaned back. "You handled pressure without contamination," he continued. "You stayed clean when people tried to drag you into their mess. That's not common." I nodded once. "This isn't a reward," he added. "It's responsibility." "I understand," I said. He studied me for a moment. "You don't look surprised," he said. "I stopped being surprised when my life fell apart," I replied. "After that, things either work or they don't." Whitaker almost smiled. The unit worked cases most officers avoided: restraining order violations, coercive control, financial abuse hidden inside families that looked fine from the outside. The work was slower than patrol, heavier, but it fit in a way I hadn't expected. I recognized patterns immediately. The way abusers framed themselves as protectors. The way families closed ranks. The way women doubted themselves, even with evidence in hand. I didn't lecture them. I listened, and when I spoke, I was precise. One afternoon, after a particularly long interview, a junior detective named Luis Moreno watched me file notes. "How do you stay so calm?" he asked. "After everything." I didn't look up. "Because chaos already took its turn," I said. "I don't owe it anything else." Word traveled, not gossip. Respect. Officers started sending cases my way. Prosecutors requested my input. Judges began recognizing my name in filings. It wasn't fame, it was trust. At home, things settled into something like peace. Emily started piano lessons at a community center 2 blocks from our apartment. She practiced every evening, fingers careful, focused. One night, she looked up from the keys. "Mom," she said, "I like our house." I smiled. "So do I said. "We weren't rich. We weren't struggling. We were steady." Daniel sent support checks on time. He never missed one. He didn't ask for favors. He didn't push boundaries. Sometimes that felt like remorse. Sometimes it felt like avoidance. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. The first public acknowledgement came unexpectedly. The Riverside County District Attorney's Office issued a brief statement regarding the Hale case. It focused on financial crimes, obstruction, attempted falsification involving a law enforcement officer. My name appeared once. Not accused. Cleared. The phrasing was careful. Officer Rachel Hale cooperated fully and acted in accordance with departmental and legal standards. That sentence mattered. It ended speculation before it could start. Margaret didn't respond publicly. She retreated. People like her always do when attention turns sharp instead of admiring. Robert took a plea deal 2 months later. No trial, no grand defense. He admitted enough to limit sentencing. Enough to preserve whatever pride he had left. I didn't attend. I read the summary once. That was enough. One evening, Sofia Alvarez came by with takeout. "You're quiet," she said, setting bags on the counter. "I'm adjusting," I replied. "To what?" she asked. "Not being in survival mode," I said. She nodded. "That's when things hit people," she said. "After." "I know," I replied. She studied me. "You don't regret anything?" she asked. I thought about it carefully. "I regret staying longer than I should have," I said. "I don't regret leaving." Sophia smiled faintly. "That's the right answer," she said. Later that night, Emily asked a question she hadn't asked in months. "Will Grandpa ever come back?" she said softly. "No," I replied. She absorbed that. "Is that okay?" she asked. "Yes," I said. Some people are only safe at a distance. She nodded and went back to coloring. That was when I understood something clearly. The story people expected from me was anger. The story I was living was steadiness. Thanksgiving came quietly. No invitations, no negotiations, no careful planning around other people's tempers. Just Emily and me, a small turkey from the grocery store, and a kitchen that smelled like butter and herbs instead of tension. I didn't realize how much I'd hated holidays until I stopped dreading them. Emily set the table with mismatched plates. She took it seriously, tongue caught between her teeth as she lined things up. "Is this okay?" she asked, pointing to the napkins. "It's perfect," I said, and I meant it. Halfway through dinner, my phone buzzed, a number I hadn't seen in months. Daniel. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail instead. "I know today is... today," he said, voice careful. "I just wanted to say I'm thankful for Emily. And for you. Even if I didn't show it right." I deleted the message without replaying it. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. Some words arrived too late to do anything but confuse. That night, after Emily fell asleep on the couch mid-movie, I carried her to bed and stood in the doorway longer than necessary. Her face was relaxed in a way I didn't remember seeing before. Safe. That was the word that kept returning. Safe. The next week brought something unexpected. Captain Whitaker called me into his office again. This time, with Assistant District Attorney Nora Feldman waiting inside. Nora was sharp, mid-40s, reputation for being exacting and fair. "We're putting together a training series," Nora said once I sat, "for officers and prosecutors, on identifying coercive control and financial abuse inside families." I listened. "We want you to speak," she continued, "not as a victim, as an investigator." "That's not usually how these things work," I said. "No," she agreed. "That's why it might." I considered it. Public speaking wasn't my instinct. I'd spent years letting my work speak quietly for me. But this wasn't about exposure. It was about prevention. "I'll do it," I said. The session was held in a municipal conference room, unremarkable and functional. About 40 people attended. I stood at the front, in plain clothes, no badge on display. I talked about patterns, how financial control masquerades as tradition, how isolation is often framed as protection, how institutions miss warning signs when abuse looks respectable. I didn't mention the Hales. I didn't need to. Afterward, a woman approached me, early 30s, social worker. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I thought I was imagining things in my sister's marriage." "You weren't," I replied. Her eyes filled, but she nodded. That was enough. The last emotional door closed on a Tuesday afternoon. I ran into Margaret Hale at a pharmacy near the courthouse. Pure chance. We froze when we recognized each other. She looked smaller, not older, just diminished. She didn't glare. She didn't accuse. She looked tired. "I heard about your new position," she said stiffly. "Yes," I replied. She nodded once. "Emily looks well," she added, glancing down the aisle where Emily was comparing cereal boxes. "She is," I said. Margaret hesitated, then said something I hadn't expected. "I thought strength meant control," she said. I was wrong. I studied her. That sentence wasn't an apology. But it wasn't nothing. "I hope you figure out what strength means now," I said. She nodded again and walked away. I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. That evening, I stood on our small balcony, city lights flickering on one by one. I realized something had shifted, without fanfare. I wasn't measuring my life against what I'd lost anymore. I was measuring it against what felt right. The case landed on my desk on a rainy Monday morning. No names I recognized. No media interest. Just a thin file marked DVF-CU-2217 and a short note from the unit coordinator. Similar dynamics, high control, proceed carefully. I read it twice before opening the folder. Lena Ortiz, 29, hospital intake nurse, married to Victor Ortiz, 37, owner of a small logistics company, 2 children, no criminal history, no visible bruises. Multiple calls to police over the last 18 months, all coded as verbal disputes, all resolved on scene. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not fear, not anger. Recognition. The first interview was scheduled for that afternoon. Lena arrived early, hair pulled back too tightly, hands folded in her lap like she was trying to take up less space. She apologized for everything before I asked a single question. "I don't want to get him in trouble," she said. "I just need him to stop." I nodded. "He won't," I said gently. "Not without intervention." She blinked, surprised by the certainty. Victor arrived 10 minutes later with his attorney, Caleb Wright, confident, composed, already framing the room as hostile. "This is unnecessary," Victor said, sitting back in his chair. "We're a family. We have disagreements." "Families do," I replied. "Control isn't a disagreement." Caleb shifted, studying me more carefully. "Officer Hale," he said, reading my name. "We'd like to request reassignment. Conflict of interest." I met his gaze. "There is none," I said. "Proceed." Victor smiled thinly. "You sound personal," he said. "I sound precise," I replied. "The evidence wasn't dramatic. It rarely is. Joint accounts drained without explanation. Employment interference disguised as concern. GPS tracking installed under the guise of safety. Texts that read supportive, until you noticed how often they erased choice. By the end of the week, the pattern was undeniable. The problem was Lena. She kept minimizing. "He didn't mean it. He's under stress. He just worries." I recognized that voice. I'd used it myself once. I scheduled a follow-up and brought in Dr. Hannah Reeves, a psychologist who worked with our unit. Lena listened, asked questions, took pamphlets. Then she went home. The next morning, she didn't show up for work. Her supervisor called it in. Welfare check requested. I drove out with Detective Luis Moreno, rain streaking the windshield, that same heavy quiet settling in my chest. The house was immaculate. The door answered on the second knock. Victor stood there alone. "She left," he said calmly. "Took the kids. Said she needed space." "Where?" I asked. He shrugged. "She didn't say." Inside, everything was in place. Two in place. I noticed the phone charger missing from the nightstand. The children's backpacks gone. Lena's coat absent from the hook. She'd planned it. That should have been a relief. It wasn't. 3 hours later, Lena called me from a number I didn't recognize. "I did it," she said, voice shaking. "I left." "Where are you?" I asked. "I can't tell you," she replied. "He'll find me." "You called the right number," I said. "Listen carefully." She was in a motel off Route 60, paid in cash, curtains drawn. Victor had already sent 27 messages, missed calls stacked like a threat. We coordinated quietly. Emergency protective order filed. Temporary shelter arranged. Victor served that evening. He didn't react the way men like him usually do. He smiled. "This isn't over," he told the process server. When the paperwork came back to my desk, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Victor's logistics company had recently merged with a subcontractor owned by a familiar name, Hale Freight Services. The entity had been re-registered under a trustee after Robert's arrest. Margaret's maiden name appeared on the documents. The past hadn't stayed in the past. It had changed addresses. I sat back in my chair, file open, rain still tapping the windows. This wasn't coincidence. It was reach. And for the first time since everything ended, I understood something clearly. I wasn't done because I wanted to be. I was done because they'd been forced to stop. Now someone was testing the boundary. I didn't call internal affairs. Not yet. The moment I saw Hale Freight Services on Victor Ortiz's merger documents, I knew exactly what kind of mistake I could make if I moved on instinct instead of intent. This wasn't about me anymore. It wasn't even about the Hales. It was about pattern. And patterns require patience. I requested the merger file through routine channels, nothing that would flag my interest. Public records, corporate disclosures, vendor compliance logs. The kind of paperwork no one worries about because no one thinks it tells a story. It did. Hale Freight Services had been re-registered under a trustee 3 weeks after Robert Hale's arrest. The trustee was a firm out of Nevada. Clean. Anonymous. The kind Margaret would choose when she wanted distance without disappearance. The timing lined up too neatly. Victor Ortiz's company had been struggling before the merger. Cash flow issues, employee turnover. Missed safety inspections. After the merger, the money stabilized. New equipment, new routes, new confidence. Too fast. I looped in Assistant District Attorney Nora Feldman under the pretense of a training follow-up. She didn't ask why I wanted to talk. She never did. We met in her office after hours. "You're seeing overlap," she said after 10 minutes of silence while she read. "I'm seeing migration," I replied. "Same behavior, new vessel." She nodded. "Margaret Hale isn't grieving," she said. "She's repositioning." That sentence landed hard, because it was accurate. "What do you need?" Nora asked. "Distance," I said. "And a firewall." She considered that. "If this becomes active," she said, "you'll need to step back." "I know," I replied. "And you're willing?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. I thought about Emily at the piano, about Lena Ortiz sitting in a motel room, whispering into her phone like freedom was fragile, about how easily systems protect people who know how to hide inside them. "Yes," I said finally, "I'm willing." The decision cost me something immediately. Captain Whitaker called me in the next morning. "I'm reassigning the Ortiz case," he said, not unkindly. "Per Nora's recommendation." I nodded. "This isn't a punishment," he added. "It's insulation." "I understand," I said. But understanding doesn't erase the feeling. Letting go never does. I briefed Detective Luis Moreno personally, gave him everything. The patterns, the flags, the unspoken warning. "Be careful," I told him. "He's not just controlling, he's connected." Luis nodded, jaw set. "I've got it," he said. I hoped he did. That night, Daniel called. I almost didn't answer. Almost. "I heard something," he said. "About my mother." "Yes," I replied. "She's involved again, isn't she?" he asked. "She never stopped," I said. There was a long pause. "I want to help," he said. I closed my eyes. "You don't," I replied. "You want to feel useful." "That's not fair," he said. "No," I agreed. "It's accurate." He exhaled. "What do I do?" he asked. "For once?" I said. "Nothing." He didn't argue. That was new, too. 2 days later, Lena Ortiz testified. Not in court. In a recorded deposition, she spoke slowly, carefully, like someone relearning how to trust her own voice. She didn't dramatize. She didn't embellish. She told the truth, the way people do when they've been quiet for too long. Victor's attorney interrupted twice. Nora shut him down both times. When it was over, Lena looked at the camera and said something that stayed with me. "I thought if I explained better, he'd stop," she said. "I didn't know I was allowed to leave." That sentence followed me home. I stood at the sink washing dishes while Emily worked on homework behind me. The apartment was quiet, safe, ordinary. That was the point. The call came just after 9. It was Luis. "They found something," he said, "in Victor's books." "Let me guess," I replied. "Consulting fees." "Yes," he said. "Paid to Hale Freight Services." "And?" I asked. "And routed again," he continued. "Through the same Nevada trustee." I leaned against the counter. "Did you trace it?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "It ends in a personal account." I didn't need to ask whose. Margaret Hale had always believed she was smarter than consequences. She'd been right, until she wasn't. Nora called me the next morning. "We're moving," she said, quietly. "And me?" I asked. "You stay exactly where you are," she replied. "Visible, clean, untouchable." That word again, untouchable. I realized then that revenge had never been the point. Containment was. That afternoon, Emily came home with a permission slip for a school winter event. "Can you come?" she asked. "Yes," I said without hesitation. She smiled and went to her room. I stared at the paper in my hand, longer than necessary, because for the first time, nothing in my past had the power to interfere with my future. That evening, as rain started again, my phone buzzed with a final update from Luis. "They're bringing Margaret in," he wrote. "Not arrested, yet." I set the phone down. The story wasn't over, but it was no longer mine to carry. Margaret Hale was brought in on a Wednesday afternoon, not in handcuffs, not through a side door, through the front. I wasn't there. That was important. The interrogation room wasn't mine to occupy, and the outcome wasn't mine to influence. That was the final boundary, the one I didn't cross, even when part of me wanted to see her face when the story collapsed. Nora Feldman called me later that evening. She didn't deny it, she said. "Of course not," I replied. "She reframed it," Nora continued. "She said she was protecting her family, preserving legacy, managing risk." I closed my eyes. "They always think control sounds better than greed," I said. She cooperated enough to avoid immediate arrest, Nora added. But the paper trail is airtight. It's only a matter of time. And Victor Ortiz? I asked. Charged, she said. Coercive control, financial abuse, violating the protective order. He'll plead. They always do. I thanked her and hung up. That was it. No rush of triumph. No surge of satisfaction. Just completion. The next morning, I put on my uniform and went to work. Same locker, same radio, same streets. Nothing dramatic happened. And that, strangely, felt like the point. Emily's winter recital was that night. She wore a blue dress she'd picked herself, hair pulled back unevenly because she insisted on doing it alone. She scanned the audience until she found me, then smiled so wide I felt it in my chest. She played carefully, a little too carefully, but she finished without stopping. I clapped until my hands hurt. Afterward, she ran into my arms. "Did I do okay?" she asked. "You did great," I said. "You finished," she beamed. That word mattered. Finished. Later that week, the divorce was finalized. No ceremony, no confrontation, just signatures and stamps and a quiet acknowledgement that something broken had stayed broken. Daniel didn't ask for anything. He didn't argue. He nodded when the judge spoke and kept his eyes down. When it was over, he caught my arm outside the courtroom. "I'm sorry," he said. This time, I believed he meant. "I know," I replied. That was all. The department hosted the training series again in January. I spoke briefly, not about myself, about warning signs, about listening to what people don't say, about how systems fail when they assume abuse looks loud. Afterward, a woman approached me with her teenage daughter. "She wants to be a cop," the woman said. "She says you made it look possible." I smiled at the girl. "It is," I said, "but only if you remember who you are when things get hard." She nodded seriously. At home, Emily and I made routines that didn't depend on anyone else. Movie nights, grocery lists on the fridge, piano practice after dinner. No raised voices, no conditional affection, no walking on eggshells, just space. Margaret Hale never contacted me again. I heard she sold what was left of the house and moved out of state. That she told people a version of the story where she was misunderstood, where intentions mattered more than outcomes. People believed her. People always do. That wasn't my problem anymore. One evening, months later, I found myself standing at the same kitchen sink where I'd once stared at the wall, wondering if I was about to lose everything. Emily was at the table doing homework, humming softly to herself. I realized then that I hadn't thought about revenge in weeks. Not because it failed, but because it finished. Revenge had never been about hurting them. It had been about removing their ability to hurt me. There's a difference. I learned that dignity doesn't arrive all at once. It's built in decisions that don't feel heroic at the time. In paperwork filed early, in doors closed without slamming, in silence chosen instead of explanation. I learned that choosing yourself isn't loud, it's consistent. And the most powerful thing you can do to people who tried to erase you is live a life where they no longer matter. If this story stayed with you, if you recognized yourself in the quiet moments more than the dramatic ones, take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe. Not because this was extraordinary, but because survival, done cleanly, deserves to be seen.